All right, so we're doing another NewtForce breakdown. Today we've got a local to NewtForce, meaning in the Central Arkansas area, athlete that we started initially working with in high school, but this breakdown video is going to be prior to this current college season. He's at a junior college in Arkansas as well. The main goal for this athlete was to improve velocity and also start to hone in on improving his command and things like that. He had some inconsistency issues, and velocity just hadn't budged in a while. So, in this breakdown, we'll talk about some of the things he does well, and we'll talk about some of the things that are lagging behind and kind of how we address that. And then at the end, we'll do a comparison of kind of his, I believe it's eight months progress from this initial assessment to his final assessment. So starting off, a few things I want to highlight that he does really well. If we take a look at the second half of his delivery, so from here, so from front foot strike all the way through ball release, there's some really important things here. So decel width is going to be a metric that he is above averaging. Essentially, what decel width is the width of the negative y curve here. So like essentially how if I had to put it in layman terms, how quickly he can redirect his momentum using his lead leg. So to calculate that metric, we go 75% of the way to peak negative y, and then we measure the width across to the other side of the y curve. So a 0.10 decel width is really good. That's something that I want to highlight that he does really well. Another metric that I'm going to point out that he also does well, I'm going to switch out here real quick, is clawback. So we've talked about clawback in previous videos, but clawback is the amount of time it takes for him to go from negative peak Y, or the bottom of this red curve, up to the next local maximum, so right here. And it's essentially a measure of how quickly he can dump energy or transfer energy up the kinetic chain. So the longer that takes, typically, um, the worse off the athlete is. So lead leg force, pretty good. He's pretty good at redirecting that. There are some things, so like Z front score, for example. Z front score is peak lead leg Z force, so the top of this green curve here. 1.9 is okay for the college range, but in an ideal scenario, we'd want to see that above 2.0. As a reminder, Z front score is, like I said, the top of this Z curve here, so peak Z, peak vertical force production down into the mound, relative to the athlete's body weight. So a 2.0 Z front score would mean that they are producing double their body weight down into the mound at peak Z. So that was lagging behind a little bit, but not terrible. So most of his lead leg metrics are relatively good. And that was kind of how he was able to, get to the level that he was at. So he's probably 88 to 91 at this point in his career. We did see a tick up later on in this process, so we were successful, and I'll highlight kind of how we got there as well. Some things that we highlighted that he needs to work on. Um, I'll start off with kind of an explanation of why. Okay, so we're going to start off by looking at the Z curve here. You'll see during leg lifts there's a dip right here. So this is what we call Z unload. This is how light you get during your leg lift. So as a reminder, Z force is vertical force. You'll see as he's standing still here, it's about 195 pounds. As he begins his wind up, obviously it's gonna move back and forth a little bit. And then as he begins leg lift here, he's gonna unweight. And then as he sits into his back leg here, we're going to get to peak back leg Z. Um, so the metric that we highlighted that he needed to work on was this Z back score. Z back score is peak Z force on the back leg. So this point in the delivery right here, relative to the athlete's body weight. So a 1.18 Z back score would mean he's producing 118% of his body weight down into the mound at peak Z. That's relatively low for our college athletes. You'll see Z back score during this session. His average is 1.15. And you'll see these are the normative ranges. Obviously, you got pro, college, and high school. He fell below even the high school range here. So for the college range, you can see we kind of want to get at least to 1.2, if not higher. So kind of our goal for him, especially since he was already upper 80s and touching, low 90s on occasion. We really wanted to see his Z back score get up towards 1.4 or 1.5 in this pro range here. One thing I want to highlight about Z back score is that it is, in my experience, just seeing so many ground force charts and working with so many different athletes, I typically see the more an athlete unloads during leg lift, the better they're able to load once they do drop into their back leg here. So if you'll see, I'm going to pause at peak unload here. So if we look at the top right corner of the screen, you'll see that 140 pounds of Z force. And if you'll remember from earlier, he weighed about 195 pounds. So ideally, for the majority of our athletes, we want to see them unload 75 to 100 pounds off of their body weight. And as you can see here, he's unloading, barely 50 pounds off of his body weight. So we wanted to work on this unload phase so that whenever he does drop into his back leg to load, that Z back score will come up and in turn, help him to move down the mound a little bit faster. Another metric I wanted to highlight that is directly correlated to this is going to be his player velo. So if you'll see player velo is 5.05, that's very low for a college athlete. If I come back to the assessment platform, if we look at player velo, he's at the bottom end of the high school range, according to this orange tick mark, which was his average during this session. So we wanted to get him up to 5.8, if not higher, in terms of player velo. As a quick reminder, player velo is just how quickly they are moving towards home plate during their delivery. So Z back score, player velo were kind of the two main metrics that we wanted to work on throughout his delivery. All right, so we'll pick back up in the comparison mode here. Obviously on top we have the initial assessment, one of the pitches from his initial assessment on top, as I was referring to earlier. And then on the bottom we have, 7 or 8 months after the fact. So the top would have been in April, and the bottom would have been in December. So if you'll see, there's some very clear progress here. If we're just going off of some of the metrics, you'll see player velo increased from 5.04 to 5.86. Z back score went from 1.16 to 1.34. And then, like I stated earlier, Z front score was a little bit of a concern. So even that went up to 1.99 to 2.15. I'll talk a little bit about some of the mechanical changes here as well. So if you'll see, some of the differences between top and bottom. Obviously, on the bottom, he's going out of the stretch, so there's going to be a tad bit of a difference here. But one of the things we focused on with him was obviously the Z unload phase. We wanted him to get lighter during his leg lift so that when he did drop into his load, he was able to produce more Z force and in return move faster down the mound. Okay, so you'll see starting off with slightly wider stance here. Obviously, he's out of the windup on the top, so you can't tell, but originally out of the stretch, he's starting with a much narrower stance. This wider stance allows him to get a little bit of a push off from his front leg. So he's pushing off of his lead foot to help aid in that unweight phase. So he's unweighting here. You can see he even has a little bit more drastic of a glove raise during that leg lift. And then as he drops into his, so we'll stop here for a second. Peak Z unload, you can see he's unloading down to about 119 pounds, which is a big change from his original. He was only unloading to 150 pounds. So we allowed him to unload about 30 pounds additional. We kind of got into that 70, 75 pound range of unload, like we talked about earlier. And then you'll see as he sits into his back leg here, peak Z force is significantly higher. So you'll see into the mound just means Z force. So see on top, he was at 225, and on bottom, he's at 273. And from there, he's able to just propel himself down the mound quite a bit faster. And actually, I do also see a correlation many times between Z unload, so how much they're able to unload during leg lift, and how much Z force they're able to put down into the mound with their lead leg as well. So I kind of see that as like a secondary benefit. Unload a lot at the beginning so that as you come down the mound and stick that front foot into the mound, you're able to produce a whole lot more force there as well. So it's kind of a side benefit of unloading more. Not only will you load more into your back leg in terms of force, you'll also be able to produce higher levels of maximal force with your lead leg here. So those are kind of the big things that we addressed with him. You can see there's really good output. You can see ACL impulse score improved pretty drastically. We've talked about in previous videos why is he transfer back being important for command and things like that. You'll see decel width. He was already really good at that, like I stated earlier, and that even further decreased. So a lot of positive changes. And during this time period, he actually made about a three mile per hour jump in terms of throwing velocity. I'll go into our NewtForce assessment platform to kind of show that comparison as well. So you'll see from April of 2025, we had about a 16.5% increase in Z back score. Y back score also increased pretty drastically. So if you'll notice with ground forces, a lot of the time, if you clean up one aspect of the delivery, a lot of the other areas will also improve alongside it. So Y back score also improved. ACL impulse score improved pretty drastically. Player velo improved quite a bit as well. And these are all just um, acceleration based metrics, meaning like the first half of the delivery. Um, so all of this was successful. You can see a little bit of drop off on some metrics going from that November time period to the December time period. And we see that quite often as well. This is another topic that I talk to a lot of players and coaches about. A lot of times, right after you see a peak, you will see a slight drop off as well. Um, it's a lot like in the strength and conditioning realm. A lot of times when you hit a new PR on a lift um, an, um, or any type of exercise, after you hit your PR, the week after, a lot of the times it'll level out just a little bit. Not by much, obviously. There's still quite a bit of positive increase from that April to December time period, but a lot of times right after a peak, it will level out just a tad bit, just because the adaptation is occurring. This is just another way of developing athletes using ground forces. And in this particular scenario, it all started with leg lift, actually. A lot of people don't pay super close attention to leg lift, but the carryover throughout the rest of the delivery is profound. I think it's something that more people should focus on.